Hello, and welcome to the High Conflict Co-Parenting Podcast. In this podcast, we explore and dive into the stress-filled world of high conflict divorce and relationships. We offer solutions to calm your world down and allow for greater positive engagement with your children and the people around you. If you find value in this commercial and advertising-free podcast, please consider donating by pressing the donate button so we can continue our helpful work. Thank you.
Welcome back, everybody, to the High Conflict Co-Parenting Podcast with Brooke Olson, and again, my special guest and good friend, Eric Sjoberg. Today, we will be doing the next episode in a series of Unveiling Self, and this particular episode will be about the Competency Matrix. So let's have some fun with this, Eric.
Yeah, so the stages of competence is a piece of learning theory developed, I think, in the 60s, initially by a guy named Paul Curtis and his compadre Philip Warren. And it has been blown up and used in many, many different layers of teaching and learning theory for many years. Initially, they created it as 4 stages, and then it evolved into 5 stages, and I prefer the 5 stages. And these are related to consciousness and competence. And so a key piece in being willing and able to play in this conversation is to really define the word competence in how we're going to use it, because most people or many people have a charge or a feel a little not good about the word competence. And as it turns out, there's 2 primary definitions in the dictionary. One of them is related to the use in such ways as an incompetent nincompoop or an idiot. And it's a rather judgmental and devaluing term, and that's not what we're using here. The way that we're using competence here is in whether we are skillful at a thing, whether we've got it good enough, and whether we can be functional in that thing. And so the 2 kind of matrices that are going in these 5 stages are competence and consciousness. First stage being unconscious incompetence. So you don't know that you don't know, which is a problematic thing. It's kind of the classic blind spot. The second stage is conscious incompetence. Now you still don't know how to do the thing, but you're aware you don't know how to do the thing or understand the thing. And that is really the key stage in all of this, and I'll say more about that as we go along. The third stage is conscious competence. Now you know how to do the thing, and you're aware of how well you know how to do it, and you're in that process of getting more skillful at it. The fourth is unconscious competence, which is you don't know about how you are skillful at the thing, but you are. You're not thinking about it. You are in the state of having ridden a bike for years and you don't think about it. You can, talk to somebody or look around at traffic and do things without thinking about riding the bike and having your balance and not crashing. Like, that's all become unconscious. And then the 5th stage is a mouthful, conscious, unconscious competence, which is now you know about this unconscious competence. You know how to ride a bike well enough to teach someone else. You know how to do flip kicks on a skateboard enough to teach someone else. Conscious competence is often used to refer to flow states, where you're in the skill of this thing and you're just grooving in it. A lot of X game athletes and thinkers and poets and writers that can hit that in, for a moment. They can be in this flow state. Being in that fifth stage of being able to teach flow states is a whole nother skill set, and not something that we're going to be going down too far in at the moment in this episode. But suffice to say that exists. And what I find is that this process of moving from unconscious incompetence into conscious incompetence is the key ingredient. It's the most difficult portion of things here. And so we will be talking a fair bit about that shift into conscious incompetence today, and how that shows up in mind and body and heart and relationships, and in some of what we talked about in the previous episode on power, love, and presence.
Yeah, the pieces that I see so frequently with the people that I work with in high conflict is where there is no notion or very little knowledge of the system, of their own internal system, of their triggers, and they're running around in a highly activated state, not knowing why they're in that highly activated state, and trying to slow the process down enough so they can gather their nervous system enough to grok a little bit of what's going on and not have them flood or go over the waterfall because they don't have any skill sets. Moving into that conscious incompetence is a difficult task, because everybody wants to get there, and they want to get there really fast. They want to understand, they want you to download, and this stuff has to be really slow fed and integrated to a large part, because that conscious incompetence, I think, is just about waking up to not having a skill set and not getting down on yourself because you don't have that skill set, and not getting frustrated, which is the natural piece to do when you so desperately want to have that skill set, because that skill set, whatever it is something that you feel is going to change your world and let you relax, which is what we all want to be able to do. So what you were saying in that coming in between the two pieces, between that unconscious incompetence and the conscious incompetence, is really a quantum leap at some point. And moving from each one of these levels is a quantum leap. So it's not going to be something where we go boom, 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 boom. We're going to go boom, 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 and integration. And then at some point it'll stabilize in that. Mm-hmm. And until that stabilize, that next movement to that next level is not really achievable.
Right. And I think this is one of the things that I've seen that is very, one of the questions that I hold is, what does it mean that, what happens when we can't sustain conscious incompetence? What are the mechanisms that drop us out of that? And I think this moves into the conversation about tolerating discomfort. And there are a number of key ingredients of tolerating discomfort. So one of the modes of it is I'm incompetent. I need to get competent right now. And then there's a movement into trying to do it right, which is very often, if not always, premature, in particular in arenas that are more nuanced and challenging and have more unconsciousness in and more incompetence. And so that premature movement into conscious competence or attempting to be in it opens a trap door that moves them back down into the baseline of unconscious incompetence, where you just crashed and you're like, what happened? I thought I knew how to do that and I don't. And where there may be a little pride in there and a relentless effort to try to be competent without really understanding what that means or where the incompetence is or what the nuances are of that particular skill or emotion or interaction. The next kind of grouping of them is when we have these moments of coming into conscious incompetence, we often feel shame or helplessness or lots of different kinds of discomfort that we don't like. And we've possibly spent all of our life trying to not feel shame or incompetent or foolish or helpless. And so we get caught in that, and we can't tolerate, we can't actually sit in our body and in our emotion while we're feeling that helplessness or shame or fear or whatever it is that's there. And so we go crashing back down into the unconscious incompetence, and maybe we have a couple of beers or do something to kind of soften that pain so that we can just relax in that unconscious incompetence and not care that we're not skilled at the thing. And that's where most of us live on the planet. We either don't try to become more skillful at something, or if we do, we try and fail and then crash and burn and go back to whatever level we were in. And that is why we're here. It's why we're talking about this.
So while we're talking about this, Eric, it just occurs to me that part of this process is working and developing a more structured, more resilient ego state.
Mm-hmm.
And the process of that requires failure.
So speak for a moment, or maybe both of us, about what ego state means here.
Well, in a short term, it's a lot of what we've been talking about through so many of these podcasts that we do is a sense of self, mm-hmm. a sense of being here and being okay with the things that are uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. You alluded to that a few minutes ago, being in that place of feeling or noticing that I am moving into shame, or that there's something in the background that is really uncomfortable with that failure sequencing. And that I can look at this and go, that doesn't make me bad. This is where I grow. Mm-hmm. This is a learning platform. And the only way, typically, we really grasp things as human beings and take that experiential piece in and learn is by making mistakes, by failing, by having a concept and trying that concept. And if that concept doesn't work, shifting it and not losing our balance, our internal state of, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I think one of the terms for that is failure tolerance.
Okay.
Like having the ability to tolerate failure. And you look at Thomas Edison, and the story is that he failed, supposedly, that's one of the terms for it. He failed 10,000 times at inventing a light bulb before he finally nailed it. And he would say, and I think he did, was, no, I didn't fail. I just found 10,000 ways that didn't work. And that's a completely different ego state. That's a place of being like in very high failure tolerance. That's a healthy ego. I would say that in the context of power, love, and presence, it is a lot of self. It's a lot of all three of those. There's a healthy strength in the person to be able to tolerate failure, and there's self-care and compassion for oneself. It's like, it's okay, we got this, let's do it again. And a presence of being in relationship to what is in that moment, whether it's how this filament wasn't really working, or the recognition that, okay, it's been 12 hours, it's time to go eat, or whatever the thing is that's going on in that. And where most of us wouldn't last 10,000 failures, a lot of us don't last even one or two.
Right.
And that is a very tricky arena to be in. And I think it points into this notion of Stoicism and the Stoics, where Stoicism isn't like being without emotion. It's about not letting the emotion of wanting to quit, or not wanting to fail or feel shame. It's about not giving into that and holding the course and being in the uncomfortable situation and sustaining it. And there's this, I would recommend to anyone, and we maybe will do a podcast about Stoicism at some point, but you can read a lot about it and read Ryan Holiday's The Obstacle is the Way, which is a great overview and intro to it. But just the title, The Obstacle is the Way, it's like, oh, okay. That's naming the obstacle, and it's like, all right, how do I do this? Do I destroy the obstacle? Do I go around it? Do I make friends with it? There's many, many ways to navigate the obstacle, but what is it that we're going to do? And who is it that's doing it? Which is why we're here.
So there's a couple of pieces that you brought up that I want to touch on. And the last one that you just said around the obstacle is the way. One of the things that I try to work with my clients with a lot is this notion that if I'm resistant to something, a concept, a direction, whatever the resistance is, that movement toward that resistance and not away from it, to work with that resistance and not be in opposition to that resistance, is the place where this stuff really starts to unfold for us, where things start to open up and we can see beyond the resistance and what it's about internally, and get maybe some insight to what that other person or that other obstacle's resistance is really about, rather than just being in this with it.
Or the resistance of a part that's in me in the IFS language. Like, I often have parts that are resistant, to exercise, or to, eat fermented foods, which is one of my things that I'm trying to do more of lately. And it's like, some days I love it, and some days I'm like, oh, hell no. And what's that about? And where is that part? And where's the connection between that part and my awareness of how healthy they are for my gut biome and my system in general. And so to sit with that and to be willing to hang out in it, and some days to just not eat the fermented food and be okay with that. And so that process of being willing to tolerate discomfort is, in many different forms, what brings us into that state of conscious incompetence. And I would say that, one of my kind of premises that I'm sitting with in the last couple months in kind of checking in with different religions and spiritual practices and Buddhism and mindfulness and all of that, it's like I'm holding the possibility that 85% of enlightenment is getting really skilled at stage 2, at hanging out in tolerating being conscious of my incompetence. And you'll see this showing up in most religious texts, and in particular in the more esoteric of whatever the religion is. And that's pretty interesting to kind of just recognize that. And what it does is it takes my foot off the back of trying to get into the competence. And like, okay, let me just see what I can find in this horizontal plane of conscious incompetence and really get to know what it is that I don't know. What is it that what do I need to know about that I'm not skillful at? And some of it doesn't matter. And some of it's like, wow, that's really impactful on my world or my relationships or my ability to, do my work. And that's pretty interesting to kind of play there. And I find that I can, the more I play there, the more that when I do step into my conscious competence, it's less kind of distracted by the emotions in me of where my incompetence shows up that I haven't really attended to.
Yeah, and being in acceptance of that incompetence isn't a comfortable piece initially.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've found through my own work is that as I can settle in that conscious incompetence, I'm not good there. I don't do that well. There's things that I really struggle with. And connect those to the developmental stages of my life and those different things that have occurred, and having an understanding of why, on some level, I have that level of incompetence allows me to relax. Whatever part is caught in the time machine that is not seeing where we are right now in space and time, and that.
Right, where you have parts that are stuck in the past.
Right.
And that don't know they're stuck in the past, and they're acting out in this time and place and making a mess. That is so much of where these stages of competence show up, and where we have parts that are stuck in the past that are trying to help us. They're trying to love us in that time and place by being vigilant. There's danger here. And, where that anxiety and that vigilance and that distractibility isn't helpful in this time and place, and we can judge it and medicate it and be very down on it, or we can accept it and be curious, like, oh, where's this part? Like, can I talk to this part? Is it willing to talk to me? Can I hang out with it? Can I love this part that's stuck in another time and place where it's doing its best to help me or love me or make things better, and help it get to know me, and where I can help it relax and feel safe, and maybe leave that time and place and come to this time and place, which is really a big essence of what a lot of parts work and internal family systems does in the healing process.
So as you're talking, there's another piece in this that from a relationship standpoint, kind of comes into this acceptance arena. And I just wanted to bring it forward and see what your thoughts are from this angle, because it's a little different angle of when we're in partnership with somebody, whether that's a romantic partnership or it is a parent-child relationship or it is a business relationship, this notion of being in acceptance, tolerating, witnessing within that relationship somebody else's unconscious incompetence.
Yeah, wow. I mean, that is a game changer. If you can do that with skill and acceptance and with the notion of no bad parts. But I find that it is extremely difficult for people to do if they have not done it with their own parts to a reasonably large extent.
Right.
Because if they judge their own parts relentlessly, and someone else shows up and they're in a part that's stuck in the past and they're acting out and making you uncomfortable and whatever, you're going to judge the hell out of them just like you judge the hell out of your own parts. And you can't really get very skillful at all of this by starting with not judging other people, at least not with any depth. If you are in some like story of like, oh, I'm just a loving person and I don't judge them and they're all fine and dandy, and you know, that most likely is especially if that hasn't been preceded by the shadow work of doing that work with one's own parts, it's more in the Pollyanna and spiritual bypass land, and it actually leads to things like, being abusive in the background or hidden, or being more overtly abusive without really knowing it.
The reason I brought that up is because I think that that's a place where people try to take these quantum leaps too fast. Mm-hmm. But I think there's something in this conversation about having that concept here on some level of using that irritation as a signal that there's something internally happening here that I'm not conscious of. Mm-hmm. That it isn't that, it's this. And not as a bypass to that, but as a entry and a doorway into this. Mm-hmm. So there's something going on over here and they're not conscious of it, but I'm conscious that it's pinging me. Mm-hmm. What is that that's pinging me, right, that I'm not conscious of?
But you're conscious of whatever that sensation is under your finger that you were just pointing to.
Right,
like,
right.
Oh, I'm upset on some level. I'm not even sure where I'm feeling it or what it is. Let me slow down. Ooh. What is this? And to kind of tend to that. And what will happen over time is you can tend to that stuff enough to where maybe it doesn't get resolved. Maybe you're still feeling that ping. But you can be in relationship in a way that isn't abusive, because there's an ownership of something happening inside of me that is perhaps from a part stuck in the past, or in some habit, or in some misconception that you're working on.
And
And
what
you
I
can
think
be not abusive in how you tend to that in the relationship.
and I think and I want to play with this a little bit, because it's really in this building the um, levels of competency in the process. But there's this notion of my upsetness is my upsetness. It's taking place inside me internally in my nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm ultimately responsible for that.
Yeah, which is, that statement right there is easier for some people to take in and acknowledge and work with than others.
Mm-hmm.
And this touches on uh, the drama triangle, like where that my upsetness means that you're victimizing me, and that means that you are a persecutor. You are being a bad person. And where that is a dead end. And maybe that's the case at some point, especially if that person is stuck in another time and place, or you are. But that becomes, there's an energy shift when you can step out of the victim energy, even though perhaps you're being victimized.
Right. And I think that that's what I was pointing to, Eric,
Mm-hmm.
in that. And again, there's this leap from conscious or unconscious incompetence, maybe a little bit of conscious incompetence, to that statement.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a huge leap in that.
Right.
But the reason I'm bringing this in is, if we can have a concept, we don't have to be competent at that concept. We don't have to be totally able to be in that. But if that concept is there, there's an opening at these lower levels of consciousness or competence that gives us a doorway to that movement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're not so dualistic. We now have like a wormhole to more consciousness that we can work on getting more skillful at traveling.
So yeah,
Maybe.
I just wanted to leave that in there, because I think as we work with our clients and whatnot, what I try to do is put a flashlight at the end of that wormhole and then work
Right.
with where we're at.
Right. So one of the things that I think is also part of this is that initial stage of having very low levels of competence can often lead us, or can be present with a lot of arrogance, thinking that we do know more than we know. And there's a great kind of study out there called the Dunning-Kruger Effect, which has been around for some years. You can find the study on PubMed if you like and read it. It's pretty interesting. But I will show you the chart from it, or at least a modified version of the chart, which is worth kind of checking out a little bit.
And for those people that are not visual in here, would you just kind of talk a little bit about that chart, Eric?
Yeah. Did I just screw it up? Yep. Let's do an edit here, because I just hit the wrong button. There we go. All right, so we can clip that other out. But so, yeah, so the Dunning-Kruger effect along the left side, the the y-axis, if you will, of this simple chart is confidence. So low at the bottom and high at the top. And then across the bottom is competence. So knowing nothing on the far left and knowing a lot on the far right. And so this is, the map of it. And what these guys did in their study of, interviewing people was they found pretty consistently that when people don't know much at all, they can be very confident. And their confidence is not reflective of their skill, of their knowledge, of their competence. And they call this, in some circles, the peak of Mount Stupid, because the chart skyrockets right here into very high levels of confidence, while there's still not much knowledge. And so the peak of Mount Stupid then begins to move, as you know a little more. It crashes down and it moves into what they call here the Valley of Despair. Because I would say there's also some kind of humility there. It's like despair and humility playing with each other. And as you move to the right and have more competence, there's a long, slow arc up called the slope of enlightenment that then heads towards a leveling called the plateau of stability. And so this whole matrix is very interesting to look at the stages of competence that we were just now speaking of, in the impact of what we know about how people are. And all of us have been at one point or other in the peak of Mount Stupid and in the Valley of Despair. So that is an interesting tool to look at and to orient to. And if you are interested, it's also worth looking up this podcast on YouTube to see this and see where things are playing here, because we can be stuck in various levels of that. So what I find is that in working with people, one-on-one and in groups, that if they, first of all, through my intake forms and interview, I tend to scare away people that are in that peak of Mount Stupid. They don't want to play. And then people that have hit that Valley of Despair and they want help and they want to figure things out, that becomes more available to learning. Like they're now in a place where they're ripe for learning. And they can learn this, map, this model of the Dunning-Kruger even on their own, and be like, all right, now I'm ready. Like I feel like humble right now. And that is the ripe terrain. That's good soil. It's rich soil. It's fertilized by the death of your ego in a way.
You've reached a level of pain that you're willing to stop.
That's right.
Doing it.
That's right. That's right.
So
yeah.
I just want to kind of circle around something that I'm thinking about just at the moment. And in terms of relationship and dealing with relationship and having a partner or somebody that we have to deal with that developmentally isn't there, or is stuck in the peak of Mount Stupid, or they're in a deep level of narcissism that they're not willing to explore.
Mm-hmm.
And you are this person over here that is trying to learn skill sets to work with that on any level. And this is a place where I really struggle, because I'm trying to teach a skill set about something that is kind of an immovable object that works outside of basically social norms. And trying to get the shift in belief systems that this other system is not anything other than working in a bizarro world is really it's kind of like a double whammy. And in this arena of the competency matrix, and trying to get them to navigate the failure in shifting their concepts, oftentimes have people just kind of go and just collapse into, that doesn't make any sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
And when you are working with your clients that hit that place of getting stuck in, this doesn't make any sense to me, how do you help them navigate that, Eric?
Well, I mean, I think first is to establish and reestablish care and connection between me and that person, so that they have a little bit of a reservoir or a safe place. But then to see if there's a potential that they can recognize that this may be a part that's feeling overwhelmed and confused, and to ask if that part will unblend from them a little bit so that they can hang out with it and get to know it more and keep it company in ways that are maybe similar to how I'm keeping the client company, but they're with this part all the time. So there's a consistency and a potential for real connection, and to just hang out in that overwhelm and that confusion, and to do it in a way that's different, because now there's contact of some sort, whether it's from me going direct with the part or from the client cultivating a relationship with the part. That's a different animal, and things will begin to organically change there, but only from that kind of ongoing presence and love and power, like the place where we're bringing in self in proximity with parts that are feeling that distressed, it's huge. It's huge. And that almost flips back on itself, because what you're saying is that this level of dysregulation has the person not feeling present. And so how can they be with their parts if they can't hold presence with the part? They can't hold presence as self. And that becomes then the invitation to do presencing practices, whether it's a simple meditation on breath or starting one of the meditation apps. I've recorded a number of meditations specific for clients and for particular kinds of things that can help people to focus on being present and that becomes, that can take a while. That can take a while, and it's really complicated. It complicates the process of healing because without this fundamental skill, if you will, competence at being present, the process is kind of stuck in the mud. And I have clients that are longtime meditators, or they are, advanced degree survivors. And someone that has an advanced degree has the ability to focus and be present for long sustained amounts of time that they can then utilize to be present with parts that they have inside that are not having a good time. And if they don't already have the skill of being able to be present, then that really is the starting point very often, is to try to cultivate that. And it can be as simple also as just going and sitting in nature, or breathing and petting your animal, your pet, your cat, your dog. Whatever it is that you can find that you can get a little bit of presence, and to work on that and not try and solve all the other problems that you've got, but to keep coming back to the simplicity of, wow, I can now track my breath for 10 minutes and I don't get distracted. That can take a year or two for some people.
And thank you so much, because that's where I wanted to pull this piece out for our listeners, is this process. When we go into overwhelm, we get lost. And when we've got this pattern of going into overwhelm, when we don't have that resiliency and that bandwidth, if you will, in our nervous system to be able to navigate some of this stuff, it becomes repetitive, and it takes time to establish these pieces so we can do longitudinally a much better job, rather than just having this sporadic, okay, I had success here, why don't I have it here and here and here? Because I haven't established this patterning enough. So for our listeners, and for the listeners of my podcast in particular here, I want to just really pinpoint this spot that Eric just talked about cultivation of that resiliency in your nervous system in any way, shape, or form that you can begin to initialize it and then build that skill set. Because I think I think that particular skill set is the foundational piece for competency, or building competency on any level.
Yeah, and resilience without presence is something different. I mean, you and I joke around sometimes with the statement, don't just do something, sit there. Like, if someone tells me that, or if I think of that, and my nervous system is really pinged and triggered and in some urgency, that doesn't land well initially, because it's really emphasizing or exposing my lack of presence. And sometimes what I need to do is go out and, go for a walk, or jump rope, or do battle rope, or lift weights, or do something to kind of move some of that agitation through my system. Sometimes I need to just sit and meditate, or go look at the garden.
And I think that the notion of don't just do something, sit there, isn't about not doing something, but it's about not doing something about what the irritation is about. To your point,
not solving it,
and moving,
not trying to solve it.
Right. Getting
Right.
up and moving, doing something else, orienting to something else, not having that be the driving force in the moment. And I think movement or meditation or moving away from that
Mm-hmm.
is a part of just doing nothing.
Mm-hmm. Right. And some of these are, like each of the three facets of self, of power, love, and presence, each of those have cultivating practices within them. So, presence of just being in the garden or meditating, of power, of, if there's a lot of agitation in the system, doing, and I have clients that do this all the time, of like they get really upset and, I have them do a bunch of squats and push ups and then sit back down again. It takes like 3 minutes and they sit back down again, and we kind of sit quietly for a minute and they're like, wow, I feel better. And the same can be said for love practices, thinking of something to be in care for, like, think of your child, or think of, a beautiful painting, or being in beauty. Those can be practices that we want to get more attuned to, and where they can not be trying to solve the agitation of the partner and the relationship that's super spun, but something different, something within the intrapersonal experience.
That's about solving the internal distress.
Mm-hmm.
And that visualization, or that being in nature, that smelling the flowers, the looking at the trees, listening to music, is a tool to soothe us, bring us more into presence outside of activation, where that, I think, gives us an opportunity to at some point come back into problem solving, if that is in fact what needs to happen.
Right. Right. Yeah. Very, very helpful in that process. So one of the things too to speak of here, I think I alluded to the notion of flow states earlier. Um, I think being, taking some inventory to see if you already have flow states in what you do, and like where you can access it. I used to be like a big wave body surfer, and when I finally like figured out how to do that, that was a place that I would go and do, and it was so incredible. And scuba diving, and I can access that in hiking, and I would say that I can access flow states in doing sessions often, and and where, in some ways my endeavor to do this podcast and to teach what I'm teaching here is to try to teach flow states through what I've found works for me, which may not work for other people, which is fine, but this is something that I find is really an interesting component, and being able to have access to flow states is something that gives me a tremendous gratitude that I'm alive. Like, it's so amazing to be in that place. The experience of touching the moment that is available in a flow state is an extraordinary thing. And it's not really that voluntary. You can't just say, okay, I'm going into flow state now. Maybe some can. I mean, I think some of these X game athletes that do stuff that is really anti-gravity wildness, but I would bet that sometimes they're not in a flow state, and sometimes they're so not in a flow state that they crash and burn. But I think it's really an important component of self to recognize that this is part of the human experience for many of us, and that we can cultivate it, but without urgency and without like trying to be in our egos about it.
Yeah, I think urgency is an indicator, and when we can relax into the urgency,
Hmm.
um, something
Notice the
shifts,
sensations of it.
right? Something begins to shift,
Hmm.
and you know, in some of these areas, when we're working with our clients, when we're doing some of the things that we're doing right now, we enter into those flow states because we've come to trust that what we need to do is right here already, that it's available to us,
Hmm.
and that we're not in a sense of urgency that I have to
Hmm.
do this just perfect and that it's going to unfold. And that when we can start to hit that place of trust, now we're moving up the competency um, matrix into, you know, at least touching sometimes on those flow states, but certainly being conscious of, I can do this.
Hmm.
And when we get conscious in that arena, there's more relaxation that comes in.
Right.
And then we can make that next quantum leap.
Right. Right. And one of the things that I intend to do on this podcast is to have friends of mine that have pretty interesting flow state experiences, and talk to them more from what that's like for them, and how that how is that. And I even have a friend that is an instructor at Red Bull, where he helps some of these X game athletes do flow states. And I think that's an interesting facet of being a human that is, beyond the scope of my understanding and skill set. But I'm fascinated by it, and I'm fascinated by how this map that I'm painting here in this initial series uh, touches onto some of these more um, uncommon states and experiences and expressions of being a human. And not just athletics, but writing and music and, artistry of various sorts. And where does, a lot of artists do their art and hit their flow state despite their angst? They don't do their art only when they don't feel angst. And so that is an interesting conversation to play in, and doorways to head into, and the same with relationships. Like, what does it mean to hit a flow state in a relationship with someone, whether it's your partner, your lover, your a friend, or even a stranger on the street,
Or an adversary.
or an adversary. There you go. There you go. Yeah, so there's this is not uh what I'm doing here, what we're doing here isn't kind of painting the lines of the outside of what we're touching on. It's really aiming to open this up, and to hear from people that have different kinds of interesting things, and learn myself, keep learning. Yeah. So, thanks for doing this with me, Brooke. Hmm. Very
Likewise,
grateful.
I mean, these are such good points for everybody to begin to
Hmm.
build a foundation. I mean, that's all we're really doing here is we're talking about a conversation to open the doors and build a foundation conceptually to start to fill in
Hmm.
through work, through engagement, through
Yeah.
reflection, and having the people around us that can help us fill in this piece of art that we're working on.
Yeah. Yeah. And foundation, but also framework. It's not like you and I have been builders in the past lives.
Right.
And so there's the foundation, which is like the slab or the floor. But some of what I sense of all of this is that it moves up and beyond, and it has some structure to it, and that it's not limited. It's not limited. Like, I am not the be all and end all of this material. In fact, a lot of it is kind of integrated from other forms, and it will continue to do that. And I'm not attached to this, and I'm curious about where this is going to go. So, yeah.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming back.
Yeah.
And again, Eric, thank you for doing this with me. And we've got more to come.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Brooke. I'm grateful. And Brooke's podcast is High Conflict Co-Parenting. And some of the conversations that he and I have, we co-brand on both websites or both podcasts. So, yeah, this is fun. Thanks for doing it.
Brooke, people don't have to wait until Friday mornings to get more content. If this is something that's helpful for them, right? This isn't the first time you've broadcast anything or recorded anything or put anything out there in the world. What are the other ways people can get the help more aggressively or speed up their recovery process? What materials are available for people right now?
Well, I've written a book called The Black Hole of High Conflict, and it's available on Amazon and Kindle.
Great.
And everything that we're talking about is really compressed and put into there. So this is a really good starter place to get in and get your mind working and to see what these concepts are about and how to start to apply them. The other place that I think that is valuable is to go to our website and look at some of the blog articles that I've written. Those are available there as well. They go into some of these other arenas, and that's at www.highconflict.net. So the book, the website are also really good places to get the material. And also we have classes. We have high conflict diversion program classes that you can get into and get some one-on-one help with this as well.
And you know me, I'm aggressive. Whatever I want to become good at or learn, I find someone who's good at it and pay them and hire them and shorten my learning curve. What if somebody just wants your help? Somebody says, Brooke has this information. He's good at something I'm not good at yet, and I want to work with him. Do you have any type of coaching or consultations or anything like that?
Absolutely, I do. I do one-on-one coaching for custody cases. I help people get ready for family court services. If you've got that in your community, I work with attorneys and clients to help them with managing and strategically setting them up to have more successful cases as well.
And how do they reach out? You want them to just go to the website or email or phone, or what's the best way for them to reach out, raise their hand, and say, I need some help?
They can email me. My direct email is brooke@highconflict.net. That's BROOK at highconflict, HIGH, conflict.net.
Perfect. That's everything everybody would need to get some help, right?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Brooke.